Stanley Williams III, better known by his middle name Tookie, yes, that was actually his name and not just a nickname, is most known for his time at the head of the infamous Crips. Though there are conflicting stories regarding his actual level of involvement in founding the Crips, he was a crucial part of the gang for the better part of the 1970s. Born December 29, 1953, Tookie was born in New Orleans. Reportedly, Tookie's father would leave before his first birthday. At the age of 6, his mom would relocate to South Central Los Angeles, where Tookie would end up spending his formative years. And again, depending on whose version of events you believe, Tookie was either a founding member or one of the original early members of the Crip gang, along with Raymond Washington. Make no mistake, even as a kid, Tookie was no angel, a troubled kid and arguably a product of his environment from an early age. In addition to being connected to the street life at an early age, Tookie would become somewhat of an amateur bodybuilder, while developing an unfortunate drug addiction. In 1981, just 4 years after the state of California reinstated the death penalty, Tookie Williams was charged, tried, and convicted of 4 counts of murder and 2 counts of robbery. The first murder was that of convenience store employee Albert Owens, during the commission of a robbery on February 28, 1979. The other 3 murders he was convicted of occurred on March 11, 1979. It was said that Tookie, acting alone, broke into a motel office in South Central LA and killed the owner of the motel along with his wife and daughter. He was subsequently sentenced to death. Tookie vehemently maintained his innocence until his eventual execution in 2005 and cited factors such as prosecutorial misconduct and a biased jury that did not include any black jurors. Whether or not you are personally convinced of Tookie's guilt or innocence, there were definitely some less than fortunate circumstances surrounding his trial, conviction, and the years he spent trying to appeal his conviction or get a retrial. In a reply petition for executive clemency, it was noted that the Fontana Police Department issued a press release indicating that they were looking for Lafayette Jones, a known sex offender, for raping a 13-year-old, and incorrectly identified Lafayette as Tookie's son, though he was the son of another Stanley Williams. This press release occurred shortly after a petition for clemency was sent to the governor's office. Certainly an interesting coincidence, right? Even with regards to the trial itself, there were certainly some inconsistencies at least worth examining. One of the shotgun shells of the murder weapon belonged to a shotgun that was given to police by James Garrett, one of Tookie's alleged co-conspirators. James Garrett himself had robbed one of the only 2 stores in Los Angeles that sold those shells just the year prior. And though the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit denied Tookie's appeal, in a dissenting opinion, Judge Rawlinson notably argued that Williams should have been granted a certificate of appealability or COA on his claim of racial discrimination, also known as a Batson claim, and that an evidentiary hearing or a new trial should have been granted to investigate the discriminatory jury selection process, even going so far as to state that Williams' attorney's failure to object to the jury selection should have been considered ineffective counsel, and lastly argued that the prosecutor demonstrated a pattern of discrimination in other cases. Arnold Schwarzenegger is an Austrian immigrant best known for his time as a bodybuilder, actor, and eventually politician. Arnold would become the 38th governor of the state of California, entering office on November 17, 2003, where he would serve until January of 2011. Schwarzenegger would cross paths with Tookie's case in his official capacity as governor on December 8, 2005, when a last-ditch petition for clemency was filed on Tookie's behalf. Supposedly, however, Tookie and Arnold had previously met in the 1970s while working out in Venice Beach. A plausible but unconfirmed story. In his response to Tookie Williams' request for clemency, Governor Schwarzenegger noted that Tookie's request was based on his personal redemption and the positive impact of the message he sends. But Arnold expressed doubt about the sincerity of his redemption and further indicated that he found the evidence against Williams to be compelling. Regardless of how I feel about Arnold Schwarzenegger as a politician, he was never the issue. Personally, I do think that Tookie should have been granted clemency, partially because I am against the death penalty in general, but also because if the state is going to be given the right to take human life in the name of supposedly seeking justice, it should be a tool yielded with the utmost caution. Even a single questionable event during a trial should be reason for clemency. Even if you believe that Tookie was guilty, and even if you believe he was not truly reformed, so what? He was never going to be released. So the worst case scenario by granting him clemency would be that he was still a hardened criminal, spending the rest of his days in a maximum security penitentiary, sequestered from the general public, a threat to no one. And what exactly would be the problem with that? Proponents of the death penalty argue that once an individual commits murder, they forfeit their right to life, which is an incredibly unique argument. No one argues that the punishment for a sexual assault should be the offender needs to be sexually assaulted themselves. Well, aside from the weirdos that fantasize about inmate rape, I suppose. Either way, there are both practical and humane arguments against utilizing the death penalty. From a practical perspective, mistakes do happen, and people are incorrectly convicted of crimes all the time. Make no mistake, innocent people have been executed, and even a single innocent person losing their life for a crime that they did not commit is an unacceptable outcome. The current lengthy appeal process is supposed to mitigate this, and perhaps it does to some degree, but mistakes will still happen. And if your answer to this is to just ensure that we only execute people when there is complete certainty of their guilt, how often is that ever really the case? Videos can be altered. False confessions happen. There are almost always extraneous circumstances to consider. And what ultimately is the purpose of wasting taxpayer resources on ensuring someone's guilt before execution? The death penalty is ultimately nothing more than state-sanctioned revenge being played out in slow motion, when that money could probably be put to better use elsewhere. Now, from a humane perspective, the goal of our justice system should ideally be to reform our offenders. We gain nothing as a society from state-sanctioned murder or even blindly throwing people in prison for life. Obviously, some people cannot be reformed and will need to remain sequestered from the general public. But the retributive instinct to incarcerate and dehumanize criminal offenders is as illogical as it is inhumane. If you have never committed a crime or felt compelled to commit a crime, it can be easy to dismiss the actions of people who break laws as the product of being a bad person, someone who is fundamentally broken and needs to be punished for their actions. Well, this analysis fails on at least two fronts. Firstly, it fails to examine the root cause of criminal behavior, both violent and non-violent. Propensity towards criminal behavior can have a wide range of root causes, anything from financial desperation, an unhealthy childhood environment, constant exposure to antisocial behavior from a young age, and much more. If someone engages in criminal or antisocial behavior, it should be seen as an opportunity for restoration, intervention, rehabilitation, and improvement. Secondly, even if one were to just grant the logic that criminals were inherently bad people, then it would actually follow that they do not deserve punishment. At worst, you would really only be able to make the case that they needed to be separated from the population in general, but punishment specifically would not make sense, because by that logic, a bad person is just a bad person. They had no choice in their inherent faulty psychological makeup. And it should go without saying, but people do not neatly fall into binary buckets of good or bad. People are complex, people make mistakes, And even when people have tendencies to certain types of behaviors, that does not mean that they are predestined to always follow those certain types of behaviors. Certain people can change, certain people would be less likely to be able to change. But regardless, people are extremely complex, and it is almost impossible to immediately put someone into a specific category and deem that they are this type of person. Putting aside the faulty logic of retributive justice for a moment, I would also be remiss if I failed to mention that there are also real-life consequences of maintaining a retributive system steeped in white supremacy and propagating legal slavery. Retributive justice and white supremacy have a deeply intertwined history, with the former serving as a tool for the perpetuation of the latter. The concept of retributive justice, which focuses on punishment for wrongdoing rather than rehabilitation or restoration, has been disproportionately applied to marginalized communities, particularly Black and brown individuals, due to the systemic racism embedded within the criminal justice system. One concrete connection between retributive justice and white supremacy lies in the enforcement of drug laws. For decades, drug policies have targeted communities of color, resulting in higher arrest and incarceration rates, despite similar rates of drug use across racial groups. This unequal treatment perpetuates the narrative of Black and brown individuals as inherently criminal, reinforcing harmful stereotypes and justifying punitive measures. Furthermore, sentencing disparities highlight another link between retributive justice and white supremacy. Studies have consistently shown that Black and brown defendants receive harsher sentences than their white counterparts for similar offenses. This disparity reflects not only individual biases within the legal system, but also systemic racism that devalues the life and experiences of people of color. Another aspect to consider is the historical context of mass incarceration in the United States. The war on drugs, for example, disproportionately targeted communities of color, resulting in the imprisonment of countless individuals for nonviolent offenses. This mass incarceration serves as a modern-day form of racial control, stripping away the agency and humanity of Black and brown individuals while perpetuating systems of oppression rooted in white supremacy. To address these injustices, a complete overhaul of the prison system is necessary. Merely implementing moderate changes, such as sentencing reform or increased funding for rehabilitation programs, fails to address the systemic issues at play. Prison abolition, which advocates for the dismantling of the current carceral system and the creation of alternative forms of justice, offers a more transformative approach. Prison abolition recognizes that punitive measures perpetuate cycles of violence and harm, ultimately failing both individuals and society as a whole. Instead, it calls for investing in community-based solutions, such as restorative justice programs, mental health services, and affordable housing initiatives. By addressing the root causes of crime, rather than simply punishing individuals, abolition seeks to create a more just and equitable society for all. Now, circling back to the case of Tookie Williams, his story serves as a stark reminder for the failings of retributive justice. Despite serious doubts about his guilt and numerous flaws in his trial, Tookie was ultimately executed by the state of California. His case exemplifies the injustices perpetuated by a system steeped in white supremacy, where Black lives are devalued and punishment takes precedence over rehabilitation. The connection between retributive justice and white supremacy is undeniable, with both serving to uphold systems of oppression and inequality. To truly achieve justice, we must work towards prison abolition and embrace alternative forms of justice that prioritize healing, restoration, and community empowerment. Tookie's story is not just a tragedy of individual injustice, but a reflection of broader systemic failures that must be addressed. Thank you guys so much for watching. It's been a minute since my last video. I've been busy with my crappy day job. But speaking of which, you know, if you would like to help a brother out, especially since it's Black History Month, go to my Patreon, you know, patreon.com/progressivewriter. Help me out, would be greatly appreciated. And, you know, leave your thoughts in the comments. I would love to hear what you guys think about this video. Genuinely appreciate any feedback. Thanks again.